Good evening, and thank you for dropping in on our 39th celebration of Black History here at Altadena Baptist Church. We've missed you for the last 2 years, and it's been miserable being away from personal contact. Just remember that our task is not done. We as a people, we're not finished with our race. Knowledge is power, and expanding our knowledge is the most important thing. Continue to thirst for knowledge of our history. I have a quote here from Martin Luther King. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And what should matter is our love for each other, how we treat each other, that we should provide and entrust and support and encourage each other. Those are the most important things, I think, besides knowledge. Our featured speaker today is Juanita DeVaughn. She is an inspiration to many and loved by all that know her. She's a wealth of knowledge and a leader within the community here in the Altadena, Pasadena area. Thank you again for your support over the years, and we just hope that we'll see you again next year. 5 o'clock, third Sunday. Thank you.
Caged Bird by Dr. Maya Angelou. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream to the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worm waiting on the dawn bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the graves of dreams. His shadow shouts on the nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with the fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still. But his tune is heard in the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Each year an offering is received at the Black History Celebration, and this year the committee wants to dedicate that offering to the meeting of human needs right here on the streets of Pasadena. And so we're going to be giving to Friends Indeed, a program to help people with special needs. The bad weather shelter has been active in past years, but now, because of bureaucratic problems, it's being done through local motels. And the most severe people, about 12 per night during this harsh winter weather, are being housed by the bad weather shelter. So please give toward this by going to altadenabaptist.org and designating your gift in the name of Black History. Let's bow in prayer and dedicate our gifts to the Lord. Father, all our gifts come from you, and the ability to give comes from you. And so we ask you to accept from our hearts these portions of ourselves that we give and make them blessing and a magnifying of those blessings in the lives of the people that will be reached through our bad weather shelter. May you be glorified through this. May people's lives genuinely be helped. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, it is an honor and a privilege to, as I would say, to be speaking with one of the many queens that we have here at Altadena Baptist Church, and I would say one of the pillars, to be really honest about it, Mrs. Juanita DeVaughn. So thank you for taking some time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Now, you grew up in Bowling, Alabama, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Tell me about your life growing up, like your mom and your sisters.
Growing up in Bowling, a country farm where we started, where the whole family started in that part of the state of Alabama, all the way from slavery until now.
Wow. And what did your family do? Like, you were telling me off camera that your mom did many different things about going to school, but what type of work did she do?
Well, we were on the farm, so farming was number one. She grew up without a mother until she was 16. Her mother died, and her father died, remarried, and that family had few children, but mother and her brother were the only ones that her mother had. Yeah. And she grew up on the land that came all the way from slavery to now.
So that land was passed down.
It was passed down from generation to generation until now.
Wow. And you still have that today?
We still have the same spot where we grew up.
Wow.
That part of the land. Mm-hmm.
So what'd y'all do for fun growing up?
Oh, fun. We had lots of fun. Playhouse was one of those. That was when we got a chance to learn how to cook and to sew and to make doll clothes. But we also played outside in the moonlight, and we played hide and go seek and many other games that we made up of our own. It was plenty of fun.
Oh, gosh. Now, share with us a memory, like a really fun childhood memory that you had with your family growing up.
The fun thing was, well, Christmas was always a fun time. At that time, many of the people, older people, the ones years before my mom, in fact, from slavery up, when they gave the land to the family, from that particular, some things we did at Christmas time, we always received gifts from this family who had moved to St. Louis, and part of our family went with them from Greene County. They went to St. Louis, Missouri, and followed the family there, and continued as a part. They were not slaves, never slaves, but they continued as a part of that family. And they would send my mother, after she got married and had these children, they would send us Christmas gifts. And all of these gifts were gifts that we could use, reading books, pictures of animals, and pictures of especially chickens and birds and animals in the forest. They had colorful pictures in that. We'd like to read them, and my mother would read them to us and tell us all about them.
And see, and when you're talking about that, it just reminds me of how more simple of a time it was then. It's like you didn't have all of the electronic stuff. You had each other, and you created things.
Oh yeah, we created those things. There were no electrical lights in place. The stars in the sky were our lights, and they were lighter. They were brighter than they are today because the nights were dark, and you could see many things from the stars above. And that's why when they said the stars on Alabama, all the stars just open up the atmosphere.
So you were saying that when you were growing up, that you were sewing. You started sewing, and you also shared with me you were a beautician with your sisters as well. Is that right?
Yes. Well, sewing was very important. Material, to buy material, that was almost impossible because cloth was 5 cents a yard or 10 cents at the most if you bought any from the country store. But my mother took advantage of it as a young wife. She took advantage of using flour sacks where we got flour from the store, croaker sacks we used to call them. Mom would actually bleach them and make clothing for us as her children. Now, did she only make clothes for us, but she became qualified through this company, the University of New York. It was kind of like Alabama A&M was to me when I went to college.
Right.
It was that kind of a college, a university in New York. And they would mail her the question and the samples to be made, and she would make them, send them back, and let them qualify did this meet the requirements.
Now, tell me, Mrs. DeVaughn, why did you decide to work in education, especially like home economics?
Well, all of the things that I knew and was exposed to was in many of the people that in my family and in the community wanted education was important. I had a great uncle that he was interested in education. He started the first high school in my community, Greene County Training School. And we would walk to school on the gravel roads and the muddy ways, rocky and pretty stony ways, through storms and rain and whatever happened, snow, whatever, we walked to school 5 miles. And this school became the main school in the county that everybody attended.
The first high school, it's a training school. It was called a training school.
It was called a training school, but this was not, it was a training used for the next grade, I would say.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And you were young. You said you were about 4 or 5 years old, and
Yeah.
you were walking to school 5 miles.
5 miles. And there was those who lived miles further up the road, because we had to be at school at 8 o'clock.
Oh my goodness.
So they would start early, those higher, older grades. They would be early walking, and as this group would meet them at this road stop, we'd join them, and the next join them, till we got to school. Now, if it was a cold day and it was cold, we had our hands wrapped up. The teacher always had to have some water near the old potbelly stove to put your hands in the water before you get them warm, because otherwise your hand would be whole coating, and you knew that you was going to have a teacher there waiting for you and making you comfortable for the next grade.
So once you went from there, what did you do in the community afterwards? Like after you finished high school there?
Oh, when I was in high school, I joined the 4-H club. That was a country organization that formed students and joined, and they had projects.
They're called the Fortune Club, you said?
No, project clubs.
Oh, project
and
clubs.
These project clubs, sometimes it was a chicken project, and you raised so many chickens, and there was a project, a contest.
Got it.
Between you and the next school, of course. And those who were the winners received gifts. And these gifts were supplied by certain companies. My project was always sewing, of course. I made my dress, and by the way, some of those old clothes that my mother would remake them, rip them up and make them into another design. She learned how to do all of this. she had taught me how to do this. So when I finished high school, my 4-H club was in sewing, and I made my blue, black dress. I knew I was going to Alabama A&M. Okay, I found out that I was going. My project was sewing. I made this black jumper that you wore, a white blouse or blue blouse, whatever you wanted to. But I made this jumper, and I got a number one amount of money. I got the ribbon for it, and the money I saved from that was a part of that I used when I went to college.
Wow. So you were truly ahead in terms of your skills of sewing.
Oh yeah, sewing and cooking too. My sister was a cook.
Really?
Oh yeah, mother always said, when you are young, the next one coming, you help them. You help them up. And you're supposed to help them as the young ones come, so they could go to school too. That was always taught to us. You help one another.
I like that you were saying that your family really focused on helping the next one through the process. Yeah, and I mean that's important today.
Yeah.
And I can say that I know I've seen you help people in the community, myself included, to get to the next step in our careers and in our lives. So I want to thank you for that. So tell me a little bit about your time at Alabama A&M.
Oh, that was our specialty. You would either go to Alabama A&M or Tuskegee. Tuskegee was a little more expensive, and so many of us didn't go all the way to Tuskegee, but we had family who went there. And Snow Hill was another school that you could go to for, men could go for brick masoning and all of that, building homes and whatnot. And Snow Hill was some of the greater ones who have come from Alabama, finished at Snow Hill. And that was the area where Dr. King's family was down in that area. His wife's family. His wife's family was down in that area.
Okay.
Married in Alabama. But anyway, let's go back to that. So at A&M, I sang in the choir, and that same little dress I made, that was that jumper that you could wear various colors on it. I wore that. That was my freshman year. I used that in the choir. On Sundays, I changed that outfit to different blouses I made. Or you made collars to fit in with it, all the colors. And you would match it with your gloves. And of course, you wore your gloves. You dressed the proper way.
Yes.
Everybody dressed properly. Okay. And you would try to have something when you went to, when we attended morning service every Sunday.
And then when you finished at Alabama A&M, what was your degree in?
Oh, home economics, of course.
Okay.
I was president of the Home Ec Club.
I enjoy hearing I'd say your story, but also the progress of, now I have a better picture of why you got into home economics, and I mean from your mom, within your family, and then being at training school, then Alabama A&M. So that's great.
Yeah.
Now an interesting question. Describe how you experienced racism or prejudice in the South.
The first that I can remember of anything of racism was when we walked to school each day when I was in that small elementary training school. We would walk every morning 5 miles to the school, and hot, rain, or cold, whatever. And but when we would get out of school daily, you'd walk in the whole big group that marched to school for 8 o'clock. We were that same group that was going back home. There was a white family that are the home that lived in the land just below our land was our land, that was their land, and other people owned. We would, in walking to school, we'd all walk together, carrying our books and getting home for dinner for after school. Well, there was a white family that lived in the land just above us, had a great big pecan orchard. It used to be the owner of a very rich man, and but he was no longer there. But there were other people who were living in that home and keeping that farm going on. Our farm was here, and this bus was a yellow bus that would pick up their children, even if they had one child or two, and carry to the white school below us. All right. Our school was here, that was there. So when he would come past us as we were walking from school, this man, well, I don't know what his reason for it, but every day he'd pass us with the school bus. We were walking on the side in the ditch, and the gravel road was here, and we'd get over in the ditch so he could pass. Well, instead of him just staying in the road,
Right.
he would swing around and make kind of a turn of
Into the ditch?
a U-turn like, and all of the gravel, and that's what they covered the ground with, because mud, they used to put gravel on the road.
Right.
They would say all over us, the dirt, dust, or whatever may have been in it. And we would run to the ditches to keep from getting dirty.
Right.
My brother was tired of it one time, and he was, they called him Joe Louis. He looked like Joe Louis, and he used to box at school. They named him Joe Louis. We had a boy named Joe Louis, one that smelling the other guy who got beat up. What was it? Oh, it was a Walcott. I don't know whether it was Walcott or anyone. My brother had him a big rock, and he just went and got some of the rock and threw him in the bus. And it hit the bus. And this man who was driving with 2 or 3 students, whites in it, he jumps out and decided to shake my brother to whip him. All of us were scared because the whole group didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
We didn't know. There were other things we had heard about civil rights. Maybe we didn't call it that at that time, but we heard of some differences. So with us getting upset, somebody run home and told my daddy. My daddy was one of those who didn't take any. He didn't take anything from anybody. He was one of those mean ones. And he got in on his horse or whatever it was. He got down there as soon as we had scattered everywhere. Daddy was there. And he really used some language which was not good for me to try to use. So every now and then you had people who cared for others, but there were some who didn't. And that one because if you own land and you own something, people and they respected you, they kind of looked out for you a little bit.
Okay.
So in that case, it didn't work out any worse. But that was just one experience I realized that's what it was.
The 16th Street Baptist Church
Yeah.
explosion. Tell me about that. What was that like for you?
The 16th Street?
Yeah.
Now, by this time, I've gone on to college, and I've received many other accomplishments I had done in the community. I was in Birmingham working as a dietitian there.
Okay.
But I had worked at Altadena as a dietitian there. I'd been a home demonstration agent for the Farm 4-H Club. I had been all these things up to this time. I'm married then. Okay. And at this time, we would go to I met Dr. King and Mount Meigs. I'm missing some things. Mount Meigs was where my first job was. I had already been through all of these stages, and here I am in Birmingham, where we had already left the Montgomery situation. And by the way, I had met Abernathy, I had met King, and Montgomery before all of this Birmingham stuff came about.
Really?
All this
Oh,
was
wow.
prior to.
Okay.
I met Abernathy and Demopolis in Mount Meigs, his family. See, this is country places. You know all these people from high school. But when I was working at Mount Meigs, Abernathy used to come over with my classes and help some of the kids in playwriting, because these were delinquent children that I worked with at Mount Meigs. So I was in Birmingham when this church was bombed. I had been going to meetings. Well, this is when Bull Connor was determined that they would not participate in many things, and you know the whole story of Bull Connor.
Yes.
He was the sheriff at that time.
Right.
He had the dogs in the water, hoses on the kids.
Right.
Well, at those meetings, they would tell us what to do if you go to be put in jail. They train you before, so you wouldn't have no problem. Well, they were doing the sit-ins and whatnot. I carried many of our church little junior choir members, and some were in jail. They were put in jail. So I had that experience to know that. Because the next day, my minister, Reverend Bratcher, said, Juanita, well, we didn't have nobody at the choir rehearsal. Did you get into that? Well, he wasn't sure whether he wanted to be with the group or try to keep things calm. So he was telling me that I shouldn't let the children get out, you know. But I went, and they went too, and stayed there until they were all put out of jail, gotten out. But the bombing, we heard the bombing from where we were. And we were living in Zion City. You could hear the bombing all over because it was loud, just like heavy thunder for a little child's voice, you know. How thunder would sound to you. It was really, really loud. And we wondered what happened. Then it really got all the news. The church was bombing. It was falling down and this, that, and the other. And that's when we knew about it. I was the dietitian for the City Schools 45, black schools in Birmingham. I was a dietitian for them. I did help during the time when the people came to Birmingham for the funeral of the girls that was killed. I knew all of them. I knew the families, and I knew a lot of the kids that was involved. They would carry the leftover baked goods and food to the church to serve all of the people who came from all over the world to the funeral. No one knew, but I just took that as my responsibility, and all of them followed through.
What was that? I mean, when I think about that, that was such a tragic time.
It was
That was a tragic time in history, and what were your thoughts about that?
Oh, it upset my whole system. Everybody was upset. And many people followed through and tried to make it to help each other. That was one of the worst times.
It sounds like you saw the inequality or the injustice for black people to get jobs. So was that what made you decide to get involved in civil rights, or how did that come about?
Well, that was a part of it. But I just, I saw where we were not getting the right. In other words, we were not getting what was needed and what we could do. And we were prepared for it, but couldn't get the job.
Tell me about the Scottsboro Boys.
All right. The Scottsboro boys were on a train. They used to hobo. People used to hobo years ago. In fact, way back during the time hoboing was, my uncle was on a train. Training was the only way that you got from one place, those one town to the other,
Right.
and found a job.
Right.
And it was right after slavery, of course.
Yeah. Now, hoboing, for those that don't know, that's
Yeah,
basically like
hoboing.
hitchhiking.
Hitchhiking. It's just like, oh, good, I'm glad you about that.
Yeah.
Like hitchhiking from one town to the other to find jobs.
Right.
And that's how many of them found jobs. And that's how a lot of people ended up in other states living there, because they ended up in those states as a place of finding a job.
All right. So with the Scottsboro boys, tell us
They
about
were
that.
on this train traveling, and this white girl was on there. And now the details of how they made it that she was molested by these black boys.
Right.
And of course they had to serve sentences as a result of that. It was well known all over the world about these young men. And it hadn't that they had done it, but it was a time when she decided it was.
Right. Because they were on the train, but what happened with her didn't involve them.
No.
Right.
No, it didn't involve them. And by the way, speaking of how many people during that time lost positions because of the color of their skin. Emmett Till, that news was kind of fresh for us because it was a young man that we could see as a boy in a bad situation. And that to us was in school, many of us were concerned about would this happen in our community?
Right.
Uh-huh.
So what else did you do starting in working in civil rights?
Oh, in civil rights, we had at Alabama A&M, we had a cousin who lived down in a real, I'd say a black community. He was a student at A&M, and he wanted to be the president of our black student of the NAACP, and he was. And it so happened that he married into our family, and he finished at Alabama A&M. But he would keep up with all the news of anything that was happening with blacks in the United States. And he was a graduate from Alabama A&M. Okay, so that was the first time we had at the college. But when I was out working in Birmingham, I knew that there were certain things that were required if you bought an item, dress or hat, in any of the stores. You had to buy, if you put it on, you had to buy it. The South was not the only place. In California, we moved from Alabama because my husband's job was closed out. And he worked at a place where there were some Christian whites who were a member of that company, but there were some whites who didn't like it. My husband was really exposed to a group of Ku Kluxers, I call them, Ku Klux Klan
members, yeah.
who worked in the iron company. He was a mail carrier, and many of the secretaries, he was intelligent enough to tell them the same thing. And these people who saw this as a mail carrier for the company, they didn't like him. So as soon as the job was available, my brothers-in-law moved to California, and we stayed there for a long time and worked with Dr. King and all of those meetings. I went to all of the meetings. I didn't miss a night. We would get, and when school was out, I couldn't say that I was working with it. I was a teacher. I would have lost my job, probably if I had. But I would go to the meetings at night, and we would carry food, we'd serve food. We would discuss what plans would be for the next day. They would have the young people, you would raise your hand if you would go to jail. And there were hundreds of people who would be meeting there.
Sure.
And you line up, and Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, and all those people, Y.T. Walker, I knew all of them, Wyatt Walker, Reverend from Tennessee, all of these people were there to tell them what to do if you went to jail.
Ms. DeVaughn, tell me why you got involved with NAACP and AXO.
Okay. I really liked what the organization stands for. And through the years, all of these people who have given their lives toward making it better, even all the way back to Johnson's when they wrote the song, anthem.
Lift every voice and sing. Right.
Lift every voice and sing. And it has always been a song in my heart that means so much to my life. Through the years, somebody was thinking before I came along, there was somebody before them, but how did it get passed down to us? And I believe in family background, knowing where did you come from and what brought you this far. Those people gave their lives to make it better for the ones following them. And I could see myself doing in my family what could make my life and my family feel better. I work with my children and everybody I could meet to make them understand that we have come from a long way, but the way can be made better if we continue it and make it better. And I always felt we could do better. And I could do better, especially with young people whose minds were young and they are bright and want new things. And you can expose them to a lot of things that you don't know what you're doing until you do it. And they let you know later, this is what you did, and it was important to me. And I always felt that I could do it with young people. I liked them, and they liked me, and I felt a part of them. And that's what I've always worked with, the NAACP. And I came from Alabama, and I said, in California, they ought to be able to do even more than we can. So I went to meetings in the community when I first came to California. And they said, where are you from? And I always, Mom said, get up front and speak what you think. And I introduced myself. I'm Juanita DeVaughn from Alabama, and I work with Dr. King, and my husband went to school with him. And I worked with Abernathy, and I worked with Jesse Jackson. I had all these people in my mind, and I said, why can't we do something here? And I joined that night with the over at Compton in one of the community meetings. And we lived up in Altadena, and I worked with Tony Stewart and several others. There was another old man, I've forgotten his name, but I started working with him. And then after that, my husband and I got interested, and he worked with the organization in the community with the NAACP also. Well, the NAACP has a young organization, called AXO. The older people is the NAACP, but then there was a man who started the young people group in the NAACP. They call AXO. So that's how AXO comes in.
Okay.
See?
Yeah.
And so in the schools, I went from one school to the other, getting an organization and students to join the NAACP. But AXO is the main thing, because AXO was an organization that was basketball, football, and all of that.
Right.
But this man wanted some intelligent people in the sciences and all of the arts in AXO.
When I think of Miss Juanita DeVaughn, the first place I think of is John Muir.
Yeah.
It goes
yeah.
John Muir for me, NAACP, AXO.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I was right there all the time.
Okay.
And the kids were right around me all the time.
Sure.
But then when we would have our meetings, that included students from PHS and Blair also.
Okay.
Those were the two. There was the three schools right in Pasadena. And of course at our church I tried to always do something about our keeping in mind what we need to do as voters and as NA. I couldn't always spell out NAACP because some people were not a member, but they would get exposed. Like there were teachers who at John Muir didn't even know about AXO. But because Ms. DeVaughn asked for money to send these kids to the national, she started sending money to national organizations, and still is, because that was a good thing, and she saw the need for students who were excelling.
How does faith and civil rights work?
Okay.
Because I
Tricky.
think about when you're at church, you do express about civil rights in a certain way. And why is it important for church to be faith, especially be involved in that?
Well, that was a part of it even in the community in Montgomery. I used to visit the churches too in Montgomery, where much of that was, many of the ministers spoke out, or they told about helping or being involved in riding about the bus rides, you know.
Right.
They all participated if we believe in what the Bible says about individuals. If you're a Christian and if you believe in what Christ taught and what he brought to this world, putting it into practice with your brother man was very important.
Why is Black history important for you, but also to the next generation?
It's important to me, and it's important to what I stand for and what I teach, and bring others that are younger than me to understand what was before you that made them work for you where you are today. In other words, the older ones have set the example, and we are to follow the example and make the next generation understand why is this important. We have our young children coming up. They need to know the lessons of the past. That which has been in the past will certainly have its foundation on those which is in the future. And our future will only be better if we make it better. It can't be just one person, that's one thing about it. It has to be in the minds of more than one to do the right thing. And this has come from way back from the time when those who started it. Many had to lose their lives to get one thing done. And it means that even up to today, the same thing is happening. And until we get our young people to understand what the past was, they're not going to know anything about the future. The future's going to be worse. Mm-hmm. And we can plant. What you plant in a seed is what grows out. You have to plant a good seed in order to get the right product. It's what my mother taught me. I have to teach my children, and they to their generation. Generation after generation must see it that way. And we must see each other as people, not as someone that is not inhuman. One person must know the love for the next one. Love is so important. You love to see anything grow and become better. If we love our children as those who have loved us, we pass it on to the next generation. Hate comes only when people do not layer. It is minus of love. That's hate. All of us are God's children, and we have the same maker. We have to set the example for those to follow. If we do not set the example, they follow anything else without knowing where they're going. Okay. I think you have to set the example through your life, through how you teach your neighbor, how you teach the one next to you. Your neighbor is not necessarily the person who's living next to you. Your neighbor is anyone that any way connected to you. That's your neighbor. And if in your own household you treat your own way, it moves on to the next one. And somebody can see the good. If they don't see the good, they'll go to the other way. Show the good that you can show in your life and in your way. And even your education. Get an education. I was always taught education is number one. And you get to understand your own life, you can explain it to somebody else. Okay?
Wow, you left quite a message with that, because when I hear you say that, it's important that it's our responsibility to share that with this generation coming up, because they do need to know where the past has brought us as the
It come to now.
Yeah, because I mean that's what Lift Every Voice and Sing talks about. It talks about passing on to the next generation and sharing what is there, and we have to plant those seeds, like you said.
The words to the song
Yeah.
expresses the very thing that I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And that song tells me, and I've always had to learn that song. That was one thing we had to learn. And then, back to the Bible, we were always taught from the big Bible with all the colorful pictures of Jesus Christ, and we just wore the Bible out just playing with pictures when we were growing up, and Mom would tell us about the Bible stories. And we would see this as people, not as Christ and how he brought up. And it was to us was a great thing to learn everything and to learn some of the Bible verses and how it applied to your life. Okay? That was number one. Everybody had to learn a poem. I remember so well. Mom would say, your poem is, I had a poem that I forget it and then I remember it and it goes away. But I always thought of that fraud. Mom said, you got to learn your poem. You got to and you'd have to sing it in concert, at a concert. And I would always remember my verse. And I'd cry if I lost the last part of it. And they'd always help me out.
But,
And
but the nice part of that is like you just said, in that it's that each of us have a part.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about the legacy and the seeds that you've planted in Alabama, here in California, at Altadena Baptist Church. And I'm grateful that you've planted those seeds, because I'm a recipient of the seeds you've planted, Mrs. DeVaughn. And I just want to thank you again for sharing your story and your heart today.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad to do it.
In closing, I'm going to pray a prayer that was first prayed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. And I do wish that you could hear it in his voice. But this prayer is just as pertinent today as it was when he first prayed it. So would you bow your heads with me? Oh God, we thank you for the lives of great saints and prophets in the past who have revealed to us that we can stand up amid the problems and difficulties and trials of life and not give in. We thank you for the four parents who have given us something in the midst of the darkness of exploitation and oppression to keep going. Grant that we will go on with the proper faith and proper determination of will so that we will be able to make a creative contribution to this world. In the name and spirit of Jesus, we pray. Amen. And now, what does God require of us but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with our God? And to the God who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ask or even imagine, to him be glory now and to all future generations. Amen. Go with God.
Thank you.